27 minutes past 8 a.m. Central African Time. Welcome back. You are tuned into News and Views on Salam Media. My name is Zaid Jadwat and I'm standing in this morning for Inayat Wadi. Now, some think electricity supply is the biggest threat facing South Africa. Others think it's water supply. But violence monitor Professor Haas suggests it is the police, the state of policing rather, in South Africa that's the biggest threat to South Africans. Professor De Haas joins us this morning on the line to discuss this further. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Zahid, and your listeners.
Right, Professor De Haas, I think let's begin with this whole, the context. Okay, so at the moment, South Africa is facing stage 6 load shedding indefinitely. And then we've got the water crisis, which is something that we've been aware for quite some time. With droughts in the previous years, and then of course recently Durban residents might be able to relate to this, the difficulty with procuring clean drinking water. But then you go on in a Daily Maverick article to suggest that the state of policing is the biggest threat to South Africans. So we've got this cocktail of troubles and woes in South Africa. But what exactly brought you to this conclusion that policing is the biggest threat?
Okay, this is the position. I mean, the police have enormous powers. They have constitutional duties to protect people, to prevent crime, and to solve crimes, and they're not doing it. And this plays out. I mean, no one needs to remind you about the levels of, they're abnormally high levels of violent crime in South Africa. And that is primarily, leaving aside social conditions, that is primarily the responsibility of the police to deal with, including through the intelligence. Right. Now, you talk electricity supply, yes. Now that is, of course, it is a very, very pressing problem. It's having a tremendous impact on the economy. It's not just inconvenience. But you must understand too, the electricity crisis is exacerbated by criminality. I was talking to a journalist yesterday who was telling me that the sabotage of Eskom infrastructure is so widespread. The teams are organized. The theft of coal from coal trucks is being replaced even with rocks, so you put that in the machinery and it breaks. Now, this is a criminal activity, and if the police were functioning properly, they would be onto this. They would know who these gangs are that are causing sabotage. Even the water. In Durban, for example, I think there were 3 people in the water department killed last year in the corruption in that department. And there's even sabotage in the water and electricity department in Durban in itself. So everywhere you look, there's a theme that the police should be onto it. That's the whole reason we've got, every station should have a crime intelligence person picking up who the local thugs are, sitting around gathering information and preempting it with patrols, and also building up strong cases, not just arresting people without enough evidence, because that's happening all the time. People don't query. The police say, we've made all these arrests. I say to the journalists, go and check what's happened. Are those cases in court? Are the cases standing? Because the detective services are so overstretched, the good ones, and most of them are shoddy. At the moment, people are buying their way into training in the police. So that's why you've got people, they're even taking people now with a grade, the equivalent of the old standard 8, a grade 10, from a very poor education system, unless people can afford decent education. So, you go into, as I do, I interact with police all the time on behalf of people trying to get patrols, following up cases, and some of them seem barely literate. You go into a police station to get an affidavit signed. They don't have a stamp, or they don't know what the proper procedure is.
Professor,
So,
I think, yeah.
everywhere policing.
And
Well,
I mean, you have mentioned about how the sort of it appears the inaction on behalf of the police force seems to be enabling this corruption that is so widespread and so rampant in South Africa, especially in state entities. But what then also about corruption within the very police forces, the ranks of the police forces? Surely that is also quite a massive challenge and
oh,
something
look,
that is.
that is the worst problem of all. I mean, Robert McBride giving evidence to the Zondo Commission says it's a corrupt nepotistic network, and the Zondo Commission heard all this evidence about friends, relatives, everybody being. We've got details of this. I'm working with police on it. The people in national management are not qualified for the job. You see, what happened? We've always had a bit of a problem getting the old brutal South African repressive police, transformed into a democratic order. That's an old problem, and we were limping along until 2009, and then things just, the corruption escalated. I mean, friends, political cadres were being put in at senior levels. The whole police service was actually being politicized, because the police if you look at the national management now, virtually all of them are from Ace Magashula's Free State. And they got to those positions because these are the key people. They got to those positions because they were politically friendly. The politicization. That's why in July 2001 in Durban, a lot of police just didn't bother to act because they were pro-Zuma. So that was what was happening, and also what was happening, and I explain in that article, and this is in these reports. There have been various reports, a panel of experts on policing, a high-level panel on state security, and of course all the Zondo Commission reports. And what comes out is this politicization of policing and ministerial interventions in running departments. I mean, you see, at the moment, Fairley runs the police. He's the minister. See him at the crime scene. See what his travel costs are. It's not his job. It's not his job. So he wanted to get rid of Sithole from the very start, because Sithole was investigating suspect people Fairley had appointed. He was moving the head of intelligence for poor performance, who's a good friend of Fairley's. And they found the pretext in that, in a judgment by Judge Davis about failing to give IPID information. Now, if you look at that judgment, you look at the evidence to Zondo of Dr. Dintwa, who was then a very good Inspector General of Intelligence. The man who got those police into trouble, Sithole and the others who were named, who wanted to get this intervention device, was the advisor, who was the advisor to the then minister, who was Mbalula. So the police were just used to taking political instructions. And I mean, it's clear that should have stopped. I mean, why have we had all these reports going right back to 2018? Because the report of the panel, the policing experts panel, which was set up after the Marikana massacre, points out what needs doing: the depoliticization, the demilitarization, because the police are supposed to be. This was the whole intention of the ANC, to move away from militarization. I mean, that was what the original Police Act was about. But most important of all was a setting up of a police board to oversee all appointments and promotions. None of that's been. The IPID legislation, IPID's supposed to oversee it, but the minister appoints the head of IPID. He appoints the head of force. I mean, there's much too much power in the hands of the minister, who should be in his office making sure policy is on track, making sure the National Commissioner is doing his job. He's not doing that. And we know what a disaster he was when he was the National Commissioner. So this is the fact of the matter. You've got all the wrong people in management. It's corruption, corruption, corruption. They cover for elite people with illegal guns. If guns go missing from the police. So, wherever you look, and as I said, you can't even distance it from the ISKCON problems.
And I think when you look at it that way, then you do sort of get a sense as to why you would go as far as to say that the state of policing rather, is the biggest threat to South Africans. But just quickly, I think, before we wrap up, so there have been a number of government-initiated reports into policing. For example, as you've mentioned in the article itself, you've mentioned the Marikana Panel of Experts report on policing and crowd management in 2018. Then you've mentioned the high-level review panel report on the State Security Agency in 2018 as well. And then, of course, the report of the expert panel into the July 2021 civil unrest. Now, by indication, all of these reports, or most of them, seem to be speaking about these high-level reviews and investigations and experts seeming to be involved. But there has been no action, as you've mentioned.
Well, that's the whole point of it. This is the whole point of what I'm saying, that those reports are there. I mean, there was a Constitutional Court judgment 6 years ago saying IPID must be given independence from the ministry, which is the norm. If you look internationally, that's the norm. A minister has nothing to do with an oversight body. And Parliament, this is the crux of my argument. Parliament, Justice Zondo says that state capture, state capture hasn't gone away, but in terms of the corruption in the police, the capture of police by the politicians. Now, what Zondo says is that Parliament has failed in its oversight, and this is exactly what I find when I deal with Parliament. I give them information, I say, well, you just take this up with the minister. The police are behaving illegally. They're not allowed to take phones without a court order. I get no feedback. They just let the minister get away with it all the time. They have not passed the legislation. I mean, Zondo is scathing. The Intelligence Oversight Committee should have passed legislation to undo the damage, the legislative damage done by Zuma the moment he got into power in completely restructuring and entrenching secrecy in state security. That hasn't been passed. So, I mean, Zondo says, this is what he says. He says, if Parliament doesn't exercise oversight, nothing will change. And that is what we are seeing. We are seeing people wanting more powers for so-called terrorism. I mean, the terrorism is that we're held to ransom by terrorist people, armed people, holding you up with automatic or semi-automatic weapons with impunity, going into rural homesteads and killing people, burning, and the police do nothing. That's the terrorism we're living with. And we know, I lived through the height of the apartheid repression in the 70s and 80s. We knew we were under surveillance if we just worked for social justice issues. And they used anti-terrorism legislation to get at people who were opposed to the government. And this is what we're going to if we don't sit up and take notice, quite frankly. And even though all this legislation is so badly worded that it won't pass, if it gets to the Constitutional Court, it won't pass constitutional muster. But Parliament should be dealing with this, and this is what I am pleading. I mean, everybody, although, some people are too disillusioned to even vote, but most people vote for parliamentary representatives. We've got a variety of parties, and you can do a lot of good work as an opposition member. I mean, I use that example of the late Philip Mhlongo. The difference he made in drawing attention, the police got to trust him. They went to him with the problems. He was able to bring those up with the parliamentary committee. They were able to interrogate it. And he was an opposition parliamentarian on the committee. And yet the people, and I'm focusing on peace, but I deal with people in other. Justice doesn't even reply to anything. Land affairs, mineral affairs, they don't even reply. The health department, you send a submission on the national health, you don't get an acknowledgement from the committee secretary. So, Parliament is not working, and we have got to make it work. That's what my message is. Please.
All right, I think we seem to have lost the line with Professor Merida Haas right there. But an interesting and important conversation going on about the state of policing in South Africa being the biggest threat to South Africans. Nepotism is widespread within the ranks of policing. Corruption and crime are prolific. And at the end of the day, citizens are vulnerable. Thank you so much, Professor Merida Haas. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
It went quiet for a moment.
My apologies for that. We seem to be having certain technical difficulties. But that's where we'll leave it. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Okay, thank you. And you have a blessed day. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we get back, Bina Chaba speaking to us.